thank you for so much for taking the time to do this. So let's start simply. How the devil are you doing at the moment?
Oh, really busy. Yeah. Uh, in between everything around the record, and we're also touring in a couple of weeks and trying to get all the booking done, because right now we're doing our own booking. Yeah, it's a lot of work. But it's getting done. It's getting done. Also, I just got stuck on a jury trial for 3 weeks, which sort of threw a little wrench in the time for me. And I deal with most of our sort of, management and administrative stuff. So, yeah.
What an unfortunate inconvenience. I don't know the system, but I presume jury trial over there is the same as ours, randomized.
It was just one of those weird coincidences, and like, I've never actually been seated on a jury before, and because usually they take one look at me and they're like, oh, hell no, and but in this case, I think that both sides thought that I might be advantageous. So, yeah. But
Fair
that's
enough.
and now I'm back at my real, my day job. So, and trying to catch up there.
Well, considering we are coming to the end of the year, when you reflect on what you've accomplished this year so far, are you satisfied with what you've been able to do?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, we set out at the beginning of the year to, I mean, we've been a band for a really long time, and this is actually our 20th year. But we've we've recorded before, but we've never recorded one of our film scores as a film score. They've always been like little adaptations of the like we'd take a segment, like a scene, and then turn it into a song.
Yeah,
that's what our last record was. And so at the start of the year, or at the end of last year, we were like, okay, we're gonna record this, we're gonna go to a studio, we're gonna work with Greg Wilkinson over at Earhammer, who does a lot of heavier stuff in the Bay Area. And I really wanted to work with him because I knew that he'd get us the the punchier sound that we were looking for, especially around the drums. We really wanted like really good drum recordings. So, and then, there's some scheduling stuff, and Charlie and I were in Europe for a couple of weeks, like Roadburn, and and eventually we actually got around to recording the record in June, and since then it's been sort of nonstop, with one task after another. So, I mean, we're definitely happy with what we've accomplished. I mean, it's a big step up from and working with Billy from Koolarrow and the guys over at Consouling Sounds has been also sort of like this big eye-opener on like a lot of things that we've never dealt with before. But I think that we've we've definitely sort of like achieved our goals for the year. Yeah, and now I'm starting to stress a little bit about next year. So, yeah, there's a lot of things we want to do for next year as well, but got to get through next month first. Yeah.
It is that, isn't it? Yeah, getting ahead of yourself, because of course we are talking about your upcoming new release, The Cabinet of Dr. Caligari, coming out November 3rd via Koolarrow Records, Consouling Sounds. There's obviously a lot to talk about here, but let's start with an obvious question. And it's simply this: why The Cabinet of Dr. Caligari?
Yeah. So when Sleepbomb started out, they were it was founded by Charlie, who's still in the band, and a guy, Mark Jones, who I used to play with in a sort of industrial metal band down in Monterey in the early 90s. And when they first started out, the very first show they did, they used the Cabinet of Caligari as visuals, and that was sort of core. The idea of putting the music with the film or with a film was sort of core to the original idea that they had. Now, back then, Sleepbomb was essentially an improv thing. Like for the first maybe 10 years that we were playing together, we didn't even really rehearse. We'd get together like once or twice before a live show, and to sort of work out like themes and just make sure everybody knew the film that we were doing, but we weren't actually writing formal music. Whereas so, and the Cabinet of Caligari was the first film that they used, and we've done it multiple times over the years, both in the improv era and then, what we're sort of we've been referring to as like Sleepbomb 2.0, which is the like actually writing stuff era. So, so we already had this sort of repertoire of films that we were working with from the improv era, and we were essentially going through and being like, okay, let's write, Nosferatu, let's write Metropolis. And then last year it was, let's write, the Cabinet of Caligari. When we got out of the pandemic, basically, we'd started working on it before the pandemic, and then the pandemic was like this giant, pause. Unfortunately, we didn't get a whole lot of work done during the pandemic because folks, a lot of the band aren't particularly technological. So, it's not like we could set up, like remote rehearsal kind of stuff. And at that time, our writing process was really like jammy. Like we'd get together and in the rehearsal studio, and then we'd play for a while and work out some riffs and groove on that stuff for like 20 minutes or something, and then which you can't really do if you're not in the same room. So the pandemic sort of stalled us as far as writing goes. So when we came back from the pandemic, we were like, okay, we're going to write Caligari. We also wanted to write Night of the Living Dead, which was, so we developed a sort of new writing paradigm where Charlie and I, Charlie usually comes up with a lot of the bass riffs. And then the two of us will sit down and like develop that with, we do a lot of call and response stuff between the bass and the guitar. and like the bass is almost like a second guitar, rather that's how we treat it, rather than like just a bass. Sometimes it's just a bass, but a lot of the times we're using it almost like it's a second, like a rhythm guitar. Where it it's playing off of stuff. And with Caligari, actually, I'm using a bass 6, so like a short scale 6-string bass, rather than like a traditional 4-string or 5-string bass. Although with Caligari, we did actually track 4-string as well. So there's 2 bass tracks. So we worked out this sort of new writing paradigm, where Charlie would come up with a riff, or maybe I'd come up with a theme or something, and then the 2 of us would sit down and we'd actually block everything out to the film. Once we'd developed like the riffs down, and then we'd bring in Rob or whoever else was playing with us at the time. The lineup was a little bit different when we first wrote Caligari. James Presley, the saw player, was still playing with us at that time. And so we'd dump it on those guys and be like, hey, this is what it is, and it was definitely a change. There were a couple of things that we wrote in the first pass for Caligari that didn't mesh well with the rest of the band, that didn't make it on the record. And then we had a couple of people leave for various reasons. James left because he wanted to work on his jazz stuff, basically. He was tired of playing saw, and it's really getting into doing like jazz piano and like solo stuff. So he took off, and then our second drummer / violinist also left at that time because he's training to be a pilot. So all of a sudden we went, and then our second guitarist also left because he was having a baby. So we went from being a 6-piece to a 3-piece. So, which was interesting. We actually did a couple of live shows as a 3-piece at the end of 22, I think. Which was weird. And then we ran into Claire, literally. My wife and I were at our rehearsal space, and the guy that has the space across from us teaches drums, and Claire, I was talking with him out in front of the space, and Claire came up on her bicycle, and she was wearing an Ulver shirt, and I was like, oh, hey, Ulver, cool, and we got to talking and stuff, and then we were walking in because she was going in for a drum lesson. And I was like, so do you do anything aside from drums? Because the last thing we wanted right then was another drummer. And she was like, oh, I've been doing some vocals and keyboard stuff. And I was like, well, my wife's here. I can give her my number and not seem like super creepy. So I was like, here's my number. Call me. I mean, we're totally looking for someone. And she actually did, surprisingly. And we met up, and she's been a perfect fit for sort of replacing, that extra element, the Sleepbomb, has always had non-traditional stuff,
Hmm.
non like doom metal stuff. I mean, when we're a three-piece, it's like, okay, we're a three-piece doom band.
Yep.
There's only so much that you can do with that when you're scoring films. And Claire's really brought a lot to it. But of course, it also meant that we had to sort of rewrite a lot of stuff because or not so much rewrite but rearrange, so that way we weren't stepping on her and her things, and eventually that's what we ended up with the Cabinet of Caligari. That was a very long answer to your question.
You basically covered like half my questions in one. I love it. It's amazing. I love a
Yeah.
flowing answer. But I have to kind of go a little bit deeper in one area, which is okay. So you make a decision and you're like, okay, we're going to do the Cabinet of Dr. Caligari, right? But how do you get to the creative process next? Is it a matter of, right, we have these scenes, we have these images, we have this vibe that the film gives off, then you write the music around that?
Yes, to a certain extent. I mean, Caligari is actually was really straightforward in that sense because the film itself is broken up into very distinct acts,
Mm,
right? So, I mean, it's literally like Act 1 through Act 6, and the film is broken up. And then there's like a couple of segments, the interludes on the record that, are also very distinct chunks of the film. So, yes, we kind of look at, it's like the first track, we, not to reference like Godspeed You Black Emperor too much, but
mm,
I mean, we're very into like dynamic range
yeah.
and like, builds, um, you know, and, so it's like you've got an opener, you need some sort of, this is going to start mellow generally, and you just sort of follow the film. And like, we like to have the big heavy stuff hitting with the sort of dramatic
Yeah.
points. Um, Not always. I mean, sometimes, but like there's some like really big noisy bits that are, when people are freaking out, basically, or like murders are going on, and then the really like, bombastic heavy parts are like the big, like the reveal of Cesar in the
Mhm.
cabinet, and things like that.
Yeah.
Um, so, I mean, we're definitely looking at the film in that sense. I mean, there's like certain beats that we want to hit. Like, the third act is like this sort of expositional act in the film where they're like mourning their friend, being killed and talking about the investigation. So that turned into something a little bit lighter,
Mm,
uh, you know, um, not a big heavy piece.
yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, it's an incredible undertaking and a very unique experience. But I can't quite get my head around like how challenging it must have been at certain points. So, from your perspective, a personal perspective, what was some of the more challenging aspects of the overall record creation?
Hmm. Eh, that's a hard one with Caligari because this one was actually pretty easy, compared to some of the other films we've done. We're kind of like working backwards
Mm,
almost because, at this point when we were working on Caligari, we'd already done a full score for Conan the Barbarian,
Yeah.
which is like 2 hours and 20 minutes. We'd already done a full score for Metropolis. The cut we use for Metropolis is about 90 minutes, and then a full score for Nosferatu, which is also about 90 minutes. So, we already had all this background on like, what we're doing. And like Rob and Charlie and I have been playing together for 19 years.
Yeah.
Well, Rob and Charlie have been playing together for like 25 years because they were playing in several bands before Sleepbomb. So there's a really good sort of collaboration, collaborative, we all, it's like the Grateful Dead or something, and we all kind of know, we know where we're going sometimes. I think the challenging bits were, adapting to the new writing process. And I think that was more of a challenge for Rob than it was for Charlie and I, because Charlie and I sort of worked out the kinks alone. And then we sort of showed up and we were like, hey, Rob, here's this thing with like the original Act 5 was this really kind of weird, almost like math metal, like doomy math metal thing, which is very much not our normal repertoire. And it had a really weird cadence that I think Rob just hated it. Like you could tell, but like every time we played it, he was just like, I hate this. It was like this really weird timing for him. After we played it live a couple of times, we ditched it basically and rewrote. When Claire came along, we were like, okay, we need to do this, and we rewrote Act 3, Act 5, and we never actually had an Act 6 when we performed it the first couple of times. We did one of our older tracks just as a filler. So we wrote Act 6 at that point as well. So, which I think turned out kind of well.
Good.
Yeah.
I mean, because going back to what you said really at the start, the cabinet of Dr. Caligari was ultimately almost like fate that was inevitably going to happen, based off the history and what was done before. But you've mentioned some others: Metropolis, Nosferatu, Night of the Living Dead, Conan the Barbarian. Of course, these is variety here. I have to ask, how do you decide what you're going to do? What movie you're potentially going to look at?
That is a good one. Originally it was all about the German expressionism stuff, partially because of the aesthetic. I mean, they're great films. They look cool. They make good visuals, and they're free. That's a big one.
Yeah.
Because they're public domain, or at
No
least they're all
copyright
public
issues.
domain now. Yeah. I mean, like, for instance, part of the release of Caligari, we're actually putting out Blu-rays that have the film synchronized with the music, which is, I think, the score, I'll get to that.
Yeah.
Well, I'll back up to your actual question. Aside from the sort of like traditional expressionism stuff, we tried a few other films, like we did the Hunchback of Notre Dame once. We've done a lot of sort of montage things where we've used parts of other films. like 2001 and Alien, and like, you know, like we've got a sort of psychedelic science fiction thing, and then we've got like an occult thing that I've edited together. But as far as like actual features, it's like there has to be a certain flow to them. You know, I mean, even even if it's, and you can't just take like any silent film and you know do yeah and you know do the, like when we did The Hunchback of Notre Dame, it was just like boring, because the film had all these like, you know, just kind of boring sections.
Yeah.
And like there's and with a lot of the other films, like what we've discovered is cross-cutting tends to be like a film that has a lot of cross-cutting doesn't work very well. It's like Conan the Barbarian works really well because literally Conan's in every scene.
Yeah.
And so like, even if there's cross-cutting, it's always from his perspective. You know, there's no like, you know, cutting from like one location to another, you know, to show, you know, two different things going on at the same time. Because when you're doing like an actual like traditional film thing, each of those scenes would be slightly thematically different, you know, either sound design wise or you know, either sound design or score wise, and it's really hard to do that live. And you know, especially with, you know, kind of like droney metal stuff, you know, it's not like real. Yeah, and it's one thing if you're talking about like, you know, Krallis or something where you can stop on a dime and, you know, switch to something else, then go back. But that isn't us for sure. And so that's definitely, you know, people suggest films to us all the time. And if I think it's a good suggestion, I'll go and watch the movie if I haven't seen it before. You know, and a lot of the times they're cool, but like they just won't work, you know, for one reason or another. So that's part of it. A big part of it, you know, it's like, does the vibe fit? You know, we've been alongside Caligari, where we've also been doing this Night of the Living Dead thing. So which has been interesting in of itself from a rights perspective, but we're all legit with it now. Yeah, like Conan, for instance, we can't actually do Conan right now because they won't license it.
Yeah.
And we have to like essentially get a lawyer to be like, hey, you can't tell these guys they can't do their music, you know. Especially when we want to pay for the rights. You know? So but Night of the Living Dead structurally, it's like totally different than Caligari. I mean, Caligari is like 63 minutes of wall-to-wall music. We don't stop playing for an hour and 3 minutes. Night of the Living Dead, we play for like 20 minutes and then we sit there for 20 minutes. Like, because there's like these giant dialogue sections. Or like, you know, we'll play and then like maybe Charlie and Claire play for like a real quiet background thing for a while. So it's very different when you're working with a film that has dialogue and sound effects and stuff. And there's a lot more work involved with that as well. So sometimes I'll watch a film and be like, hey, I'd love to do this film, but there's no way that we can do it because with a dialogue film we have to, with with a non-silent film we have to do a bunch of sound editing to remove the original
Yeah.
music. Yeah, and there's a lot of tricks and like software and stuff that I work with, but sometimes it's just not possible. So
Yeah. And I'm not surprised you get I wouldn't be surprised. I wasn't surprised at all by you saying that you get obviously lots of recommendations. Hey, do this, do that, and so on. And because I ended up having a look myself, and these aren't recommendations. I just pulled out 3 that I looked at and thought, okay, would this work? And basically, have you ever considered these 3? Just because I think they could work. So I've got 1928's The Fall of the House of Usher.
oh, that's a good one. I haven't, I should probably rewatch that. Actually a quite good suggestion. Like I haven't seen it for 20 years probably. Just as an aside, I have a film MFA, so like I've watched a lot of movies over the years. So but yeah, that's a good suggestion. We're also thinking about, well, sorry, continue with your other suggestions.
Yeah, let's talk about 1921, The Phantom Carriage.
I considered the Phantom Carriage. It's definitely on the like, hey, we might want to look at this someday. Yeah, like
Fair enough.
I've got it's in the Blu-ray library, waiting to be evaluated. Again, I watched it maybe 2 or 3 years ago, and I was because I saw, I'm forgetting who it was. Somebody actually did it up in Vancouver a couple of years ago. And I'm trying to remember who it was.
Oh,
it was somebody cool. Yeah, sorry. But yeah, that's also a good suggestion. Yeah.
All right, the last one, just because it's a little weird and out there, 1926 Faust.
So Faust, actually, we've done a bunch of stuff with parts of Faust.
Right, that makes sense.
Yeah, and I mean, because there's so many amazing like visual chunks in that, and then there's like 15 minutes of him chasing a girl around a tree. So yeah.
Yeah, limited what you can do.
Yeah, so Faust definitely features heavily in our sort of German expressionist thing. And actually up on our website, I think I cut together a video for our track Plague, which was sort of like, that was actually like written about Faust. The whole like bringing the plague to the city thing. That was one of our like, ooh, we want to write a metal song kind of moments. It actually is like vocals and stuff, but yeah. So
yeah, that's what I had really, because once you kind of narrow it down to a certain section, it's like intriguing to do. But you what you said itself, even I'm aware of. I like a lot of these films. I enjoy a lot of that particular era, silent era, and in horror in general. But how do you make music out of something that is 30 minutes of straightforward dialogue, then this and so on? You can only do so much, which makes the cabinet of Caligari so fascinating. Obviously, you've obviously been doing this for 20 years, if you can believe that. So I guess this might be a wide open question. What, for you personally, has been some of your favorite moments of making music with Sleepbomb?
Being really loud.
Love it.
When it works, it's really great. and a lot of the venues that we play in are actually movie theaters. We play in movie theaters much more than we play in clubs. Although we've definitely been starting to play in clubs a bit more the last since the pandemic. By our scales, a bit more means like 3 times a year instead of once. But the audiences really get into it, especially in the cinema thing, where they're there to see the movie, and they're there, and we get like some amazing feedback from folks, and there are people that have seen us like multiple times. They like bring their kids to see it, to see like Conan. This one guy came up to us after we did Conan once, and he's got like his 7-year-old and his 9-year-old like daughters with him, and his like whole family, and he's just like, this is my favorite film, and I've I could never see it again without hearing your and we actually hear that a lot, where it's sort of like changes, the music changes how you view the film. Like, even if you've seen the film a whole bunch of times before, like Conan, for instance, and the Basil Polidoris score is incredible. It's a classic film score, but it's also like very Baroque and very sort of twiddly in a lot of spots, whereas what we're doing is, it really changes the vibe, and parts of it get a lot more aggressive, parts of it are a lot more like sort of psychedelic, and I think we're and recontextualizing is the term that I've used a lot, even though my spell checker doesn't like it. I mean, fundamentally it's and Sleepbomb's more of an art thing than just a straight doom metal band, which is one of the reasons why we haven't really recorded much music, because the live experience is, with the film, is what it's about. So I'm interested to see the reactions to the record, because it's a film score. It's not a doom metal record, even though it's doom metal or drone or whatever you want to call it. I find it hard to categorize this sometimes.
Yeah, I mean, I think the genre placement for you is an absolute nightmare. It's we've got to do it to some degree because, hey, make it easy for people to read. But yeah, drone doom or just creative music, it's anything and everything.
Yeah,
I can't wait. So I mean, I should have I've said at the start, but I have seen the Cabinet of Caligari more times than I can remember, and I hopefully, like many people, I am stoked to do what you just said there, to have a new experience of a movie I've seen more times than I can count, and potentially go down that route of, now I can't watch this without having that music.
It's always possible.
Yeah.
And there's some other great scores for Caligari. Not knocking them at all. And there's several other ensembles that do really interesting silent film music, and that's like their thing. What is it? Invisible Czars. Those guys are pretty cool, except for the time they did Nosferatu in the same theater as us, like a week before we did, which we were not happy about. And like Alloy Orchestra does a lot of cool stuff. They're out of New York. And Clubfoot Orchestra here is pretty nifty. Yeah, one of the things we've been sort of failing on a little bit is actually exploiting the genre aspects of what we've
Mm,
been doing. We like getting into the festival circuit and like conventions and stuff like that. And that's something that I'm going to be working on next year. So,
fascinating, because I almost like I know I'm not personally responsible. I can't pitch you anywhere. Like if you were to come to the UK, for example, I don't know if you've ever heard of Fright Fest. It is the UK's biggest horror film festival. It takes place at the end of August. So this year's one has just passed us by in London, Leicester Square, central London, over
okay.
3 days, showing movies and stuff like that, unique experience and things like that. And I just thought, my God, this would be the perfect opportunity to, as you say, do a showing of either Caligari or Night of the Living Dead, playing here and so on. Like that's what I pictured. And it got me thinking, it was like, what would it take to get Sleepbomb over here? Like, what do we need to do to get Sleepbomb over to our shores?
Money.
Yeah, there it is.
Yeah, it's really, yeah, it's really just about, making sure that expenses are covered. I mean, we're a cheap date in a lot of ways. Like, but, I'm the expense of coming over to the UK. That's something where it would probably need to be part of a tour or something like
Of
that.
course.
Yeah. And in order to do that, we'd really, need like a European booker, somebody, one of the issues that we've run into is, we talk to bookers and they're like, I can help you with like traditional venues, but they don't know how to deal with film stuff. And
Right.
then we talk to the film people and they're like, we don't know how to deal with the music stuff. So, eventually at some point we're going to find like someone that has the right sort of mix of skills. So that
Mm.
way I don't have to do it anymore. Right now I
Mm.
deal with all the booking and like, talking to theaters and stuff. And they get freaked out sometimes, I mean, because we have to roll in and, I mean, I just tell them up front, like, hey, we're going to need the room because we bring in all our own production. We're the only, when we play in a movie theater, we're bringing all our own sound in.
Mm.
And the only thing we're doing with them is using their projector, basically, in the venue. So because they don't have music sound, they have theater sound.
Yeah.
And we can't be blasting big metal stuff through their theater speakers. Bad idea. They'd be
Yeah.
angry at us probably. um so we have to be like, okay, this mean we want to play at your theater, and they're like, great. And then I'm like, and we're gonna need at least 3 hours before the doors open to set up, and at least an hour afterwards, which means it kills screening times for them.
Of course.
So it can be a tough ask for some theaters. So, but some are really into it. Like we've got a good relationship with the Roxy in San Francisco, the new Parkway in Oakland, and now on this tour we're working with several other theaters that are really into it. The Clinton Street Theater in
Mm.
Portland, where apparently the show is already almost sold out. So
Fantastic.
yeah.
Oh, it's great to hear. It really is.
Yeah. But
Okay. Nick on.
no, I'm ready.
Well, I was about to say we're coming up to 50 minutes of interview time. So I'm just going to ask you one more and I'll let you get on with the rest of your day. And it's simply this. When you look at yourself now and see what you have become, comparing yourselves, the band, to who you were when you first got started, what do you attribute to your longevity?
So I'm fundamentally, I'm longevity wise, it's Rob and Charlie and I. You know, we're the only permanent core members. You know, I mean, hopefully Claire stays around for a long time. Brown, I need to mention him as well. Brown's been working with us for about 8 years, and he does our production. And we definitely consider him part of the band, not just like the sound guy. He's involved in tons of aspects of the band. He just doesn't play an instrument. And you know, he's really important. I think number one is just we're all friends. You know, I mean, we all know, you know, to accommodate each other's foibles, and you know, to a certain extent. There's some things that, you know, and we don't fight a lot. We're not one of those bands. You know, it's like we don't get our creative energy from conflict, which, you know, some bands are very, you know, I mean, when Mark and I, the other founder of Sleepbomb, our previous band down in Monterey, we fought constantly, and that was part of the, you know, part of the what made it work. You know, but with Sleepbomb, you know, but also I think because we spent like the first 10 years being like a zero commitment, like improv thing, you know, where it was sort of like, hey, you know, like a text thread, like, hey, you know, you guys want to do a show? We'd only play like once or twice a year. You know, usually at like arty things, like in galleries or you know, at like arts festivals, and like at the beer garden at the Zeitgeist in San Francisco. That was a popular venue for us, mostly because half the band worked there. And you know, so yeah, I mean, just being friends is a big part of it, you know, I think. And you know, being in agreement about like the direction of the band. So I mean, since we, you know, we had this little hiatus like 2013 to like mid 2013 to mid 2014, and then we got back and Charlie and I started running things rather than Mark being the driver. And then Mark ended up having to drop out because he was having a baby, and because of professional commitments. He was like the lighting designer for like Thievery Corporation and stuff. So he was also on tour all the time, which didn't help a lot for Sleepbomb. And like Charlie and I wanted to play more, but Mark wasn't around 8 months out of the year because he was touring with Thievery. Yeah, so I mean, I think Charlie and I mean, we're, you know, really good friends, and we spend a lot of time together outside of band stuff. We go to shows and festivals together. Like we've been to Europe together like multiple times, going to fests. Do you go to Roadburn?
I've never been to Roadburn, no. In Europe, Hellfest is the last one I went to in France. Yeah.
Claire's been to a bunch of Hellfests because she's French. But haven't been to Hellfest, but we should check out Roadburn. You'd probably like it.
I think so. I think,
yeah, if you do, you can come hang out with us. Yeah.
Oh, is it a yearly job for you? Yeah.
Sorry.
Is it a yearly?
We go every year. Yeah. And then like we've been to Iceland and Norway. Like we went up to Inferno one time, and we went to Roadburn and then Inferno the next weekend one year, which was a little bit much. Like something like 105 bands in 10 days. Like, we're by the end of it, we're like, okay, no more.
Incredible.
Yeah, so I mean, I think that's a lot of it, is just, I mean, we're very much on the same page. It's, if we disagree about, something direction-wise or writing-wise, we know how to come to compromise with each other. It's very rare that, somebody is like, stand your ground and the other person totally disagrees. Yeah, and, Rob's a bit more passive, but he definitely, and so we have to like sort of poll him for his opinions rather than getting them up front.
Yeah.
But aside from a couple of incidents with police whistles, yeah, like popping up in the middle of sets, like it's pretty rare that he's doing something that and it just works. And I mean, I think that's the key to longevity. Yeah.
Well put. And as you say, it works, and it continues to work now, because as much as we can, talk about things from the past, we've also talked a lot about the future, what comes next. It is the 3rd of November, of course, the Cabinet of Dr. Caligari, out via Koolarrow Records and Consouling Sounds. And you've mentioned plans for 2024, so the future is super exciting. Thank you so much, Tim, for taking the time to do this. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. Yeah.
Thank you very much for watching. If you'd like to see more content like this, please consider hitting the subscribe button. It is gratefully appreciated. You can find us over at gbhbl.com, our full website, where reviews, news, and so much more goes up daily. We're also on all social media platforms: Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, Threads, at gbhbl. Just search for gbhbl and you will find us out there. We also have merchandise on sale. You can access the shop via the website.